Atira has 40 years of brave feminist leadership, doing great things in community. The services we provide and how we show up in the community, that hands down, that's never been wavering. That's our greatest strength. We have to have people who are authentic. You can't be anything but authentic in this work. People with lived experience, walking alongside people with lived experience, that's the key.
Welcome to another episode of the Housing to Whole podcast. Today, we're excited to sit down and chat with the new CEO of Atira, Donnie Rosa. Thank you for joining us, Donnie.
Thank you, Tanaz. It's such a pleasure to be here.
First of all, congratulations on your new position.
Thank you.
And a lot of our audience members are eager to get to know you. So, could you tell us who Donnie Rosa is and what motivated you to join Atira?
Yeah, sure. Wow. The big question, who am I? I think I'm somebody who comes into this work with huge curiosity, always wanting to understand what my role is, what my voice is, um, how I contribute or how I show up in this space for good work. I've done a lot of learning about what it is that we do, but also how I can be part of this. So, who am I? I'm somebody who's really curious. I'm somebody who's committed, and when I start on something, I'm 1,000% in. Why Atira? I stand on the shoulders of many Irish women, my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother, who fought their own battles to be and to have their voices. And I watched that growing up. I watched these strong, for their time, feminist women own their space. And so I come into this with a knowledge that women can do pretty much anything. My own mom is my inspiration and my role model. And so I come into this work knowing that the strength of women is where I want to be, and the feminist approach, the feminist vision and mission that Atira has, to me, that just speaks to me.
You have been visiting ever since you started, a lot of programs, and you've been visiting program managers, staff, front support workers. What has been your experience so far?
Wow. First of all, it's been beautiful to be welcomed into people's homes, to be visiting our spaces, to meet the team. What has struck me so much is that when I go into these places, it's actually relationships and it's people creating or being in community together. When I go into a place like Rice Block where they're planning their meals together and they're talking about what their day is going to be, or if I go into a space where um, they're really truly in community. These are communities that are so important, and yeah, we create these walls and these rooms and these spaces, but ultimately what we are witnessing is community, and that's how people thrive. So I've had the privilege of going into these spaces and being welcomed in, being invited to come back for birthday celebrations, anniversary type celebrations, whatever it may be, because at the end of it all, really, how do we walk through this world together? We do it with community and not isolated in spaces. So what I've seen is some pretty spectacular uh, folks who are out there and in providing services, living in spaces, who are kind of just connecting with human beings on a human level.
Definitely, you're right. Atira is a community, and ever since I started here, I do feel that as well. And I wanted to tell you actually my experience that we had in the office and the encounter that I was mentioning your speech at our staff meeting and admiring the way you were delivering your message and your any tips that you have for my public speaking. And your answer was to be yourself And it was just outstanding how a simple answer, authenticity, actually very simple but very important, and which is one of the core values of Atira. But unfortunately, authenticity is very hard to reach sometimes. A lot of us, due to traumas, ingrained beliefs, fear of rejection, fear of speaking up, we cannot find that authentic or cultivate that authentic self. What is your message or advice in overcoming those fears and finding that true self within?
I think that we all have a story. And I think that we all deserve to tell our story in the way that works for us. And for some people, it may not be going on a podcast. For some people, it may just be saying it or writing it or talking to a friend. But when it comes right down to it, stories are the fabric that hold us together. Stories are the way we relate to each other. Stories are how we find common ground. And so everybody has a story, and part of my story includes you, and your story includes me. And it's a it's kind of a beautiful way to be in community together, to walk alongside each other. One of the things that we at Atira say is let's meet people where they're at. That's not let's. That's what we do. We meet people where they're at. We go to spaces that other service providers may not go to. They actually look to Atira to go to those spaces. And everybody deserves to be feeling like they can tell their story in a safe, non-judgmental way. When we go into places and we say, you can tell your story, but here are the conditions. You can live in this place, but you have to not use, or you have to keep your kids, or you have to keep this work. That's putting conditions on their story. What we want to do is go to where they're at and walk beside them and have people, and especially women, have voice in what their story is. We don't have to have everybody tell it, but we have to create a space where everybody can tell their story if they want to, and that we're not dictating what their story is.
Yes. And speaking of stories, a lot of women in Atira have stories, and some of those stories are gender-based violence, which is one of the key significant issues that Atira addresses. What strategies or initiatives do you think Atira as an organization or communities can prioritize to further support survivors or prevent violence in our community?
We know that women, and in particular, Black women, trans women, women of color, are targets. They're not just recipients of violence, they're not on the receiving end, they're targets. This is an aggressive targeting of women. And we need to do whatever we can to provide as safe a space as possible. We can't just stop there, and part of that is creating community, creating space where women feel safe in community, to have a voice, to tell their story, to ask for help, to just be in space safely. It's not enough for us to just stop there. We then have to have an advocacy voice. We need to look at these systems that are made to oppress women. And so we have to work sometimes outside of those systems to have voice, to give space for voice, to make sure those stories are told, but also to make sure that women know they have a place to come to. They know that they have somebody who will take their voice forward for them and with them. We need to look at policy. We need to be looking at how do we influence policy. I look at what's going on in the world today, and I worry about my trans brothers and sisters. And I worry that the targeting is becoming a norm. I worry about Black women, women of color, and how Indigenous women are murdered and missing. And we as a society, we need to stand up and witness this and then do something about it. And it's not okay to say that the systems that are in place right now are going to protect us because they've demonstrated that they can't.
You spoke about a safe place for women to come in, and Atira is a community of individuals with lived experience who have experienced traumas and violence. And I was actually fortunate to interview several of amazing women who have lived experience, and right now they are paving the way of hope for others. Why do you think lived experience is such a essential factor in leading an organization such as Atira?
We have to have people who are authentic. You can't be anything but authentic in this work and vulnerable and raw and genuine. And people with lived experience, walking alongside people with lived experience, that's the key. I don't know any other way. I don't know that any other way of approaching this would be successful because your lived experience, that's your story. That's why you're in this space because you understand. You understand what it's like to be there. You understand what it's like to move through that space, whether it's to leave the space or return to the space or stay in it. And you can do that. You can walk alongside somebody without the extra burden of judgment on them. As soon as we start to judge people in these spaces, then we're just as bad as the oppressors. We're just as bad as the system that's made to perpetuate this oppression. What we need to do is look at the value of lived experience being actually the key to being in this space successfully, to walking alongside people without judgment, and to truly just saying, I'm here with you, and I may be able to add value and I may not, but maybe I'll just sit here with you, and that's okay too.
And just listen and be
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
as you mentioned, everybody has a different story and different lived experiences.
Yeah. And it's not my story. It's not up to me to say where you should be going
Yes.
in your story. It's up to me to understand that we're all connected. And part of my connection is sometimes just sitting with you, and that's now I'm part of your story, but it doesn't mean that I get to dictate what your story is.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, I wanted to talk about change. Atira has undergone significant change in the past year, and managing change can be challenging sometimes. So, what is your message? And our audience would like to also know your message in regards to change. And what is your advice for navigating through it?
I don't know that we're in a world right now that will ever not be changing. We have had such dramatic change, the pandemic being one of them, um, the climate crisis being another. We're constantly adapting to the world. I don't know that that's going to change. But what I'd like to say is Atira has 40 years of brave feminist leadership, doing great things in community. I think that we need to hold on to the stories, to the her story of Atira, to the understanding that being in that space takes bravery, it takes vision, it takes, the ability to say the things that other people aren't saying and other organizations may not be saying. 40 years of that. It's no mistake that Atira is where we are today. The last year has been hard. There have been some things that were unfair, unjust, and change that was imposed upon Atira. I can't comment on that, the why or the how, but what I can say is this resilient organization is standing right now saying, hey, we're through this transition period. We're now looking at what is this next chapter. And I don't want this last year to define who we are. I want the 40 years that led up to this to define who we are in this community. And I think that our team also feels that way. So now we have a chance to write our story from here. not defined on that blip in time, but defined on the shoulders of visionary, strong, powerful feminist leadership that has been in place for 40 years. So, where do we go from here? Well, we embrace that change is happening, change is always going to happen. But if I have my voice in that change, if I understand that change, if we understand that the values that we come to this change with are good values, I may not understand every reason for all the changes we're doing, but if you can understand that it comes from a place of good, it comes from a heart of good, then you can give it a little more grace.
I love it. Change is inevitable. That's just
Yeah.
so true. As a new CEO of Atira, what do you see the organization's greatest strength? And where do you see opportunities for growth?
Mm. I'll go back to our greatest strength is who we are. Who we are. We know who we are. We know that we're the ones who show up for people and we walk alongside. I think that when it comes right down to it, the services we provide and how we show up in the community, that hands down, that's never been wavering. That's our greatest strength. Our opportunity is to be a leader in that and also to really look at how are we approaching this work? We, as I said, we're in a system, a colonial construct that is made to oppress. How can we be better? Acknowledging the land we're on, the stolen land that we're on, and acknowledging that the people from this land actually have so much to contribute in terms of how our culture could and should be, whether it's to do with the climate, the way we interact with people, with each other, the respect we bring to the work. I think there's an opportunity to stop and listen. Listen to the people who have been here for time immemorial and understand that those values that kept this land and kept this people and kept the connection between all things people, land, air, animals, those are the values that we have to return to if we're actually going to be making a difference. We can't continue to have these systems that oppress. We can't continue to ignore the fact that we're destroying the climate and the environment. We can't continue to just oppress people and not lift up voices and listen. So we have a chance to do that. We have a chance to be better in how we approach each other and the work. And you know what? I'm going to say it straight up. Leading with love. Everybody in a colonial construct and in all my career that has always been seen as a weakness. And I vehemently disagree. Leading with love is the only way to lead right now.
Leading with love and listen. Amazing. Lastly, this is a question that we ask all of our guests on the podcast, and that is, how do you envision the concept of housing to hold?
I love that. A while ago, we would hear housing first and things like that. And, you know, the idea of that is good. Yes, we want people in housing, but like I said right at the beginning of this conversation, we're not creating community or allowing space for community to be created. It's just walls. It's just a bed. When I leave my room and walk down to the kitchen or the washroom and I know that somebody's going to acknowledge me, maybe even know my name, say hello, that's changing me. When I know that I'm going to do a communal meal, with my friends, with my family, with the people I live with on a Tuesday night because it's somebody's birthday or something. That's what hope is. Housing is a part of it and it's an essential part, but we do so much more. And I think that it's important to recognize that every person is at a different stage in their journey. And so we can't just say, okay, we're going to meet people at this stage. we have to look at what are all the stages. How are we supporting, moms and children? How are we bringing families back together? Is that part of, work experience through our social enterprises? Is that part of somebody being able to build the confidence to be in a space to gain employment if they can and if they want? Is that confidence knowing that if I am using, that I can do it in a place where somebody cares that I don't overdose? Those are the things. That's the hope. And hope is like a story. It's everybody's definition of it. Everybody's understanding is different. My hope is very different than your hope. Our goal as an organization is to recognize that we don't tell people what their hope is. We understand, we listen, and then we walk alongside them as they find what brings them hope, what gives them hope. And it may be as simple as somebody saying their name and saying hello.
Thank you so much, Donnie, for joining us and taking the time to sit down and chat with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you, Tanaz. I think you do a great job at this.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.